Their presentation is on Rumi, shams, and the mystery of relationships. Won't you please welcome them?
It was an incredible thing listening to all the presentations yesterday and today, because I began to reflect, there's so many themes that are in our presentation also. And at first I noticed my inner critic was there saying, well, many of these things have been said. And then one of the presenters this morning changed that story to we're all circling, we're circumambulating this mysterious place of healing. So of course, these similar themes and threads would begin to surface. And I love the language of quantum physics, and we're all in this entangled relational field, from our physical level to the cells in our atoms and our energetic bodies. And so there's almost no way that through synchronicity we couldn't come together and have similar themes. So I want to just reiterate how thankful we are to be here and the incredible work that Creativity in Madness does and that Barry and Jacqueline do and everybody who supports it. And it's so nice to be here, not watching slides of bacteria in a dark room in Maui. So this is the fourth time we've been here and presented, and we thought it might be nice to actually talk about an artist. So we chose an artist that's very dear to our hearts, and that's the poet Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. And for a moment, how many people have been touched or know the poetry of Rumi? So we're really going to look, we're going to use him and the relationship with his teacher, Shams of Tabriz, to explore
the mystery of relationships.
And we'll do that by looking at the lens of attachment theory some, so we can understand connection and body, this level of the heart. And there's a sort of dirty word in psychotherapy that's been used once this morning, and that's love. Because I think we could look through the literature and not find one word or one article really about love if we Google searched it. And love is one of the most important forces in our lives. So we'll sort of cheat and talk about attachment, but I want to say that love is a field that is vast on all levels of reality, and attachment theory is one tiny lens into it. So this picture shows what's happening in our culture. There's an incredible lack of connection. There's an incredible divisiveness in our nation, in our world, and inside ourselves as well. And when someone comes in to see you for a healing relationship, for a therapeutic encounter, oftentimes the medical or the emotional problem that they're presenting on the surface is not the most important thing. There's a need for a sustained, caring, empathic relationship over time. And that's always in the background, and sometimes that's actually the most important thing. When I was in my residency director took me to a talk he was doing to the family practice residents. And he told them, fewer than 50% of the people who come and see you will follow through on your medical advice and do what you want them to do the way that you want them to do it. And he said, they may be there for some other reason. So we want to begin to explore what that other reason is. But first, we'll talk a little bit about Rumi. So, Rumi, for those of you who don't know, was the best-selling poet of the 20th century, a dead 13th century Persian mystic. And he was also the founder of the Whirling Dervishes, which is a beautiful turning meditation that drops you into your heart. It said that if you're in your head, you get dizzy. If you're in your belly center, you become nauseous. So it puts you in your heart, and when you're doing this meditation, you're at the still point of a hurricane or a cyclone. The reality spins around you, but you find and hold a center. And that's one of the things that Jung said. It's a miracle that an individual can hold a center of consciousness in the midst of the maelstrom of life. So Rumi is born September 30th, 1207, in what would be today Balkh, Afghanistan, an area where there's incredible turmoil and chaos on our planet today. He dies 67 years later on December 7th, 1273, in what would be today Konya, Turkey. Now, his father is, interestingly enough, about 59 years older than Rumi. So there's already something interesting happening there. And he's a very renowned religious scholar, teacher, educator in his community. And Rumi, at a very early age, is drawn to spiritual practice and is engaged in praying and fasting and is found weeping in his practices. His heart is engaged at the age of 5. But this area of the world, as much of our world today, is unstable. The Mongol invasions are coming in to his hometown. So at the age of 12, his family becomes refugees. And they are on the road for 6 years, going from province to province, city to city, town to town, trying to find a new home. And during this 6 years, Rumi's beloved mother dies, his brother dies. He does marry and have 2 children. Now, when we look at Rumi, and we can see what an intellectual family this is, there are 90 camels dedicated to books in this caravan through the Middle East. At the age of 24, finally, the ruler of Anatolia, Turkey, invites his father to settle there, and he gives them a religious school. And his father, again, becomes very popular, a central figure in the community, organizing and creating relationship. And he allows Rumi, who's incredibly brilliant, he's a scholar, a theologian, an educator, a meditator, he allows Rumi at times to teach. So at the age of 24, when Rumi's father dies, Rumi is given the school. Now at this point, it's interesting, Tamerzi is a friend of Rumi's father, and Rumi seems to always have a father hunger. So Tamerzi takes over guiding Rumi, but Rumi takes over his father's school. And after 2 years, Tamerzi recommends that Rumi go to Syria, and he leaves his family and community for 7 years to engage in more religious studies and more internal studies. And when he returns, he takes over the school again, and he is the most popular preacher and educator in the area, and it is estimated that as many as 10,000 students and followers will show up for one of Rumi's teachings. So he's at the pinnacle of his career. He's the most successful person in his community. He's got everything. He's got everything all together. And we know that when we have everything all together, the higher we are, the bigger the fall. Something's going to happen here when we think we have life all figured out. At the age of 38, Rumi meets his teacher, Shams, kind of the way I met my teacher, my wife.
So let me tell you a little bit about Shams, because Shams isn't your typical therapist. He is a wild dervish. You never know what's going to come out of his mouth. But what he is famous for is the light that radiated from his heart, from his eyes. And he was such a spiritual person that he felt bereft of not having anyone to receive his teachings. So he prayed to God and asked for just one student who would receive him. He got the message to go to Konya, Turkey, and find Jalaluddin Rumi. So out in the courtyard, where there's a beautiful fountain, he sees Rumi going by after one of his teaching sessions, and he stops him, takes the books out of his donkey, and throws them down the well. Rumi is aghast, because those books were his connection to his father. Those books were his connection to God. And Shams says to him, and you can see how this is like what it is to enter therapy. He says, I can bring those books back up for you, completely dry and unharmed. Or you can choose a new way, find your heart, find love, and be with me. This began the relationship between Rumi and Shams. They sequestered themselves for many days and nights, engaged in spiritual discussion, engaged with their hearts. engaged in the eye glance, turning, listening to music, becoming ecstatic. And Rumi learned a whole nother way. He broke free out of just being that scholarly person. But as life always does to us, Shams left. And Rumi couldn't take it. His longing, he wanted him back. He invested in Shams, his love. So when Shams was away, he sent his son to come and get him again, brought him back, tried to involve him by even having him marry his stepdaughter. But things just kept unfolding. His stepdaughter died, so much animosity in the community because Shams and Rumi were so close. And whether Shams was killed by one of Rumi's followers, or whether he just knew it was time to leave, this time he left and never returned. Rumi was heartbroken. And it was during this time that he really began to write poetry. He would turn around a pole, and as he would turn, he would spout poetry, and his followers would write it down. And it was about his longing, about what he wanted, that love. And as he did this more and more and more, he began to finally see that love in each person's eyes. He began to see his teacher Shams in everyone. And this was the transformation of Rumi that allowed him to become such an amazing poet and person.
So first we want to consider a little bit the psychodynamics of Jalaluddin Rumi. The first and most important thing is that he's a refugee. It's estimated that on planet Earth there are at least 20 million refugees at this point in time. There would be about 5 million in Syria alone, and that does not include internally displaced people. So Syria would have about 11 million refugees. So the second is, with that, he loses his home. They leave behind friends. They leave behind all that's familiar. They may even have left behind family. So there's a tremendous sense of loss. And Rumi loses his mother, his brother, and then at the young age of 24, he loses his father. So there's a gaping hole in his heart that nothing will fill. But we can see he's intellectual, he's bright, he's teaching, he's filling, he's covering over that hole until he meets Shams. So all these things create this loss, this hole in Rumi, a sense of deficiency. There's no solid ancestral place, no solid ground for him to, sometimes the non-human environment. Many people, the relationship with nature is where they get sustenance. That's gone, that's changed. The familiar has left Rumi. So he's trying to find this relationship with some mentoring father figure, and that is eventually coming to fruition in his relationship with Shams. But to look at what happens in relationship, first we need to look at what happens in the relationship with ourselves, and we will do that through the lenses of triune brain theory and explicit and implicit memory. Paul MacLean is a neuroscientist. In the 1970s, he says we don't have one brain, that we have three. The first is what it would be the brainstem, the reticular activating system, and he says this is the lizard or reptilian brain. It's about territory, your boundaries, it's about aggression, it's about survival, and it's about reproduction, keeping the species going. And for those of you who don't know about the reptilian brain, if you've ever had a property dispute with a neighbor or you've been cut off in traffic and you go into road rage, guess what? And when we look at the political posturing and what's happening today, that is all the reptilian brain trying to get territory. But what happens next? Because reptiles eat their young, mammals don't. The young come out and they are tender and they need to be cared for. So the mammalian brain comes next. And that's really the limbic system, the amygdala, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, because the mother and infant, we need to have audio-vocal communication. We need the gaze. We need to tune into our infant and care, and all the emotions of love and fear and anger. They all begin to develop here so that we can care for and take care of our young ones and build our communities just like our hearts are opened here, really with the creativity and madness family in a way. Our emotional mammalian brains are bonding here together over the course of this workshop in this week. So that may be also where the mirror neurons come in. So then next we have the neocortex, and of course it has the left hemisphere, and that we can see was what Rumi was so developed in. He was a scholar. They had those 90 camels of books in the caravan. He teaches, he preaches, he knows things on that scholarly level. And in a way, he's not really in touch as much with that right hemisphere. And what does Shams do when he throws the books down the well? If you look up there, he takes the left hemisphere and he throws it through music and poetry into the right. And he throws those books down the well into his heart with this deep sense of connection and relationship. And he throws that left hemisphere into his body as he organizes and sublimates that aggressive energy into the incredible physical meditation of the turn. And so then when we look at this diagram too, we can see explicit memory is this conscious, it's intentional memory. We want to remember something, we recall, like in Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. We're recalling what, when, who, where. And then the implicit memory would be more in the emotional brain and the brain stem. And with the implicit memory, this is where especially in the early part of our life, this is what's forming who we are, this implicit memory system. And when there is trauma or neglect, when you're fleeing a Mongol horde, and this is in the environment, the implicit memory is activated. And so that amygdala can be hyper-aroused, and we can be flooded. And if you think about taking a driving lesson, if you remember your first driving lesson as a child, and you remember who it was and where you were and what you did, that's your explicit memory. Now, if you come back from those driving lessons and you're just a better driver and you don't even know about it, that's the implicit memory. Now, if on one of your driving lessons you had an accident, and you now go to drive the car and you start to shake in fear every time you get into that car, that would again be that implicit memory system. And I want to, one last thing with this image, when we look at the instinctual brain, we can think about the belly center. That's how we refer to it in a lot of spiritual work. And then the heart center is that emotional brain. And then the mind center is our intellect and our awareness that reflect the capacity to inquire and reflect. So when we're looking at this is what I like to look at, what happens when we get two triune brains and two systems of explicit and implicit memory together. If we look on one side, that could be me. The top left there is my mind. The middle arrow is my heart and that emotional mammalian brain. And the lower one is that instinctual brain. And then we have these mysterious sort of golden rays floating down. So when we get together with the consulting room, this is some of what happens when I try to break down the mystery of relationship and the mystery of what's happening, because so much is going on. It's like one of my mentors said, Beethoven said, try to play my Ninth Symphony, and it's almost impossible, some of his last works. And he said, but at least you tried. So as therapists, at least we're trying. So someone could come into my consulting room, I can be taking that history, we can be looking, we can be reflecting on the person and their life and who, what, and when and where, and I can be engaged in cognitive therapy, and I'm very much in that mind center, I'm very much in that neocortex. We may be talking a little bit about imagery and some things and getting in the right hemisphere too, but that's sort of person to person. And then I can go in that corner and I can reflect on the person's emotional body. I can help them recognize what's happening in themselves. As they sit, perhaps they look a little, my mirror neurons kick in and they look scared, or I go to that body and I see a flush over their eyes and I know there may be sadness, or maybe they're really agitated and I bring that to their attention. They say, gosh, it's scary being here with you today. I don't know why, I feel like running out of the room. So I can bring my awareness to their emotions and help them recognize them. I can bring my awareness in there to their body, and that process of self-recognition allows them to organize and to bring that reflective in. So we can see as we go up there, I bring the attention, we're bringing the unconscious, conscious, they're becoming familiar with their emotions and their bodies. And a lot of those implicit memories are going to be in those lower systems. But that's not the whole story, because we have these horizontal. So sometimes when we sit with a person, I tune in most of the time to what's happening inside me, what's happening on an emotional level, what's happening on a physical level. And when I've worked with someone for a while, I may say, oftentimes when I sit and work with someone, I really pay attention to what's going on inside me. And I notice today, as I sit with you, there's an incredible amount of fear, and I wonder what's going on with you. I wonder if we aren't up against the same thing. There's one woman, and I realized I didn't even need to be in the room. I was walking across the parking lot to my office, and I was already shaking in fear, and it only got more when I sat with her. But it was amazing when I brought that up. So there was no conscious aware of that. There was that emotional contagion or infection. I sensed in, brought it up to my awareness, communicated to her, she went down, and now she was able to begin to organize and talk about things that previously she couldn't. And it's interesting, we talked about multiples, or we talked about sleepiness, is one of the most amazing ones when I'm in that lower one, when I'm sort of belly to belly, that instinctual self, that core physical sense of self to core physical sense of self in the consulting room. In my residency, I was working with a wonderful woman who had multiple personality disorder, and I would notice, I saw it about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I felt as if I was being drugged. I felt as if someone was putting sodium pentothal into my vein, and I couldn't understand it. And so, after a month or two, she had to change, and she came in at the 10 o'clock time, which I'm normally quite awake, and I felt like I was being drugged at 10 a.m. in the morning, and the 3 o'clock time, which is a low time in the kidney meridian, for those of you who know Chinese medicine, we're often tired at that time in the afternoon. I was actually completely awake. So I didn't even know that much about sharing yet, but I began to figure it out, and I said, you know, Miss C, as I sit with you right now, I'm noticing I'm feeling incredibly tired and sleepy, and what's happening with you? And she kind of comes up out of this fog and said, I was going to the faraway place. She was starting to dissociate. And so and then I did find a nice article on sleepiness and the countertransference, and oftentimes when someone's repressing strong emotion or they're dissociating, I will get sleepy, and I'm sad to say, for whatever reason, that's the biggest barometer that I have is sleepiness. I see, and it probably just me. I get sleepy with people a lot, so I may be aware of how I repress my feelings, because that's some of my work, is to open my heart. And so then we want to look at these silvery lines that sort of float down, and that's when we're considering these transpersonal realms of experience, something outside of that linear box, something that goes to that intuitive realm that Michelle began to talk about. Sometimes you may even have a dream for a patient. I've had that experience. Or my wife, a dream for our son. Now, a beautiful story I heard last fall at the Science and Non-Duality Conference. Stephen LaBerge told his story about founding the field of lucid dreaming. So he's starting to do it, he's having a hard time, but occasionally he has a lucid dream, and he begins to encounter a Tibetan Lama who comes back night after night and teaches him about lucid dreaming. 10 years pass, he's at a conference, and he sees the man across the room. He walks up to him. He's never seen him before. He is, in fact, a Tibetan Lama who teaches Tibetan dream yoga. How does that happen? There's something a little larger outside of the box than we normally think about. So at the core, we want to now switch gears to look at attachment theory, attachment styles in research, because this is the core of what Rumi and Shams are talking to us about. In a way, you can think of that Sufi path, it's sort of a bipersonal relational meditation. It's that free-floating state of awareness that Freud talks about, and we're tuning into it. We're opening up within the field. And it's said that when we're performing Sema, when we're doing the whirling turn, if we're all in our hearts, we're all interconnected. There's no separation between observer and turner, that we're all in our hearts relating at the same time. So before we talk about attachment style, I think we should switch back and hear a poem from Rumi.
Love Dogs by Jalaluddin Rumi. One night, a man, it could be you or myself, is crying out, Allah, God, maybe beloved, friend. His lips grow sweet with the praising. Your lips. Until the cynic says, I've heard you calling out, but have you ever gotten a response? The man doesn't say anything. He stops praying and falls into a confused sleep. Oh, what do I do? I guess nobody's out there. He dreams of Kidder. the guide of the souls, in a lush green forest. Why have you stopped praising? Because I never heard anything back. The longing you express is the return message. The grief you cry out from, oh, why is life so hard? Why are there all these things that are constantly happening? Why can't it be good? The grief you call out from draws you towards union. Your sadness that wants help, oh please, could you just give me a little love? A little approval out there, come on. Is the secret cup. Listen to the moan of a dog for its master. Arr, arr, arr. That whining is the connection. There are love dogs no one knows the names of. Give your life. Give your life to be one of them. Arr, arr, arr.
So now let's look at the poem from the perspective of attachment style. So when we consider the poem.
So the poem starts off with really the basis of what it is to be human, what it is to be really anyone. We want love. We want acceptance. The man is calling out, crying out, asking, is anybody there?
And it's so interesting that Rumi uses a dog because he's right there into that mammalian brain where that pure expression of heart to connect is. So this is the secure attachment style. There's that longing and it's responded to. And we study attachment style 3 different ways. In one, we do in-home observation. And we look at the mother-infant together. And in the secure attachment style, the parent is free, they're autonomous, I'm emotionally available to the child, I'm perceptive, I see what's going on, I'm effective, I change their diaper or burp them or whatever's needed. The second thing that we do is it's called the infant strange situation, which is an elaborate procedure. Basically, we stress that attachment bond. The mother and infant are together, a stranger comes in, the mother leaves, the mother returns, and then we watch what happens to the infant. With the secure infant, they're going to seek proximity because it's been a little stressful. They're going to soothe easily, and then they're quickly going to return to play and be having a great time. And now we flash forward 20 years later, and I'm doing a study, and the same child I'm going to bring, and I'm going to interview them. I'm going to do something called the adult attachment interview. And in this, I'm actually not that interested in the content of what they say. I'm much more interested in how they answer the question. So in someone with a secure attachment style, they will have a detailed memory of what happened. They'll have a balanced perspective about the good and the bad, and they will have a narrative coherency. It's a little bit like Lewis talked. Their story will be coherent and logical through space and through time. And so what does that mean for us as a clinician? When someone comes into your office with a secure attachment style, they will perceive you as emotionally available. They will see you as perceptive and effective. And they themselves, when they're sick, when they're traumatized, when something's wrong, they will seek out, when they have that cold or flu, they'll want to come in, they'll listen to your advice, they'll give a good history. This will be a great historian. They'll have a balanced perspective. They'll have that narrative coherency. It's an easy history. I'll find out what's going on, and then I'll tell them what to do, and most likely they'll take it, and they'll be quick to return to their life and to soothe. But not everyone has a secure attachment style. That was about 58% in the adult interview. The next is the anxious ambivalent style, and how does that relate to the poem?
So in the in the poem, really, Rumi goes through everything, because I think all of us are a part of everything. We have it all in us, the secure, the anxious, the ambivalent, and you'll see more. So in this one, it's the cynic. It's that part in us that always says, oh, but that person isn't really going to be helpful, or that person doesn't remember you, or there's always that doubt that the relationship isn't going to be there, or they're going to be there in a way that we don't want. They're going to kind of try to control us.
So we do that in-home observation again, and the parent is either enmeshed or they're ambivalent, going back and forth. And they're not consistently available for that child. And then we do that strange situation, and we stress the relationship. When I return, my child seeks proximity, but they are not easily soothed no matter what I do, nor are they quick to return to play. They just stay and they cling, but they're not getting what they need. That's not resolved. And then 20 years later, thank you very much, I have her grow up magically and stop clinging. 20 years later, she comes to my office. I'm doing that interview for my study, for my university. And she, when I asked about her childhood, she has lots of output. She's preoccupied, intrusive. This is what we sort of refer to as verbal diarrhea. You're just flooded with information, and you're going, what do I do? How do I stop this person? How do I get a good history? And then when she thinks about her past and her childhood, she either idealizes it or she's enraged. So what does this mean for us as a clinician when a patient with that anxious, ambivalent attachment style comes into our consulting room? They will see you, hopefully you're in a secure place, but they will see you as enmeshed or ambivalent and not consistently available. And when we have our fragmented 7 to 10 minute sessions that we're supposed to do in general medicine with people, that's an easy one, and we're rotating partners, and we're not there in this huge mangled care organization, so that's going to get activated a lot. Now, when she's sick, she's going to seek proximity. She's not going to be easily soothed. I'm trying to do all the cool thing. Nothing seems to work. She really doesn't want to leave. My 11 minutes are up. She doesn't want to leave. I don't know what to do. And then there's lots of output again in her history, and it's so hard to focus. And then with me, guess what? I'm either going to be the best doctor ever or the worst one ever. I'm going to be either idealized or enraged, and it can flip back and forth at a moment's notice. And then the next is the avoidant attachment style, and that happens in the poem.
He quit praying. So that part of us that just says, I don't need anybody, that's it, forget it. I'm going my own way.
So we can see with the anxious ambivalent, almost that emotional part and that amygdala memory was flooding the person. In this, the person just cuts out their heart. They become an adult child. They deaden their emotional body. So we do that in-home observation. The parent is dismissing, distant, and rejecting. They're not really engaged with that parent on a very consistent level. The child, when we do that infant strain situation, I come back, the child does not seek proximity and does not appear upset. We flash forward 20 years, we're doing that adult attachment interview, and she dismisses and denies. She says, I was kind of beaten and abused, and mom and dad were around, but it was great, no problem, happy childhood, everything is good. A lack of recall of what went on. So they come into our offices, and of course they're going to perceive me, no matter what I'm doing, as distant, as rejecting, as disinterested. And this is the kind of patient, they have a pneumonia, or they have their bypass surgery, and they don't come in for follow-up care, because they're not going to seek proximity. You're going, why aren't they showing up? They have to come in and get the follow-up care. They're not really upset. They dismiss the importance of their illness. They minimize it. And then again, they have a lack of recall. When you try to get that initial history and evaluation, you can't get much. And then the last is the disorganized attachment style. Then where do we find that in the poem?
So in the poem, Rumi talks about falling into the confused sleep. It's that the confusion is always between one thing you want and one thing that you feel like you can't have. And so that's what this whole disorganized state is. They can't even form a figure enough to know what they want, let alone believing that they can't have it.
And some people feel that this disorganized state is just the other two, an extremis or combined. But we go back to this in-home observation, and the parent is actually disorganized. The parent can be disoriented. Think you're living in Syria and everything's blowing up around you. Or think you're a parent in Orlando, Florida, after that mass shooting. You're going to be disoriented and disorganized. You, the parent, will seem frightened or frightening. The world is a terrifying, overwhelming place. And then we do that infant strange situation. The infant, I can't even really relate, is chaotic, is disorganized, and is self-injurious. And if this person has the good fortune to get and through life 20 years later, when I do that adult attachment interview, she'll be disoriented, there'll be tremendous conflictual behavior, self-injurious, and there's a history of unresolved loss, like the refugees, and trauma.
And you often see it in their own lives. There's one continuous chaotic problem after another going on.
And so they come to your office, and again, they perceive you as disorganized, as frightening, or frightened. And when you try to take a history, it's just chaos. And these are often the people we see that are tremendously self-injurious and have tremendous conflictual behavior. So what's a clinician to do? Because we're not just trying to treat, we're now being bombarded with all these ambivalent people, disorganized people, avoidant people, and it's going to activate us. So I like this slide. It's really showing the relationship between the mind and the brain. There's a tremendous interconnection between the mind and the brain, incredible neural connections to the limbic and emotional and to the instinctual brains. And then we can also see these things coming out towards the throat. The heart also releases hormones, and it releases oxytocin, the bonding and relational hormone. And interestingly enough, the electric field of the heart is about, I forget what heart mass says, about 60 times more powerful than the electric field of the brain, and the magnetic field of the heart is about 5,000. That's why in many spiritual systems the focus is always on the heart, whether it's bodhicitta or the heart of Christ, or the Tonglen practice in Buddhism, the heart in Sufism, the prayer of the heart. This is of such importance, and we're beginning to see from a neuroscience perspective, the heart is really important. So again, when we go back to that mind-heart connection, about 58% of the people have that secure attachment style. About 19% have that anxious ambivalent, and about 23% have that avoidant style. Now when I go back, that's about 58 to 42%. We're pretty close to what my residency director told me would happen, that about 50% of the people are going to not show up or not going to follow through or not do what you recommend. And then we want to look in psychotherapy research. It's considered there are 4 phases. One is the pre-contemplative phase. And that's what we talked about. The patient is there. They're not really in relationship yet. They're sort of wondering if I should really connect. You get them into treatment, and then they enter the contemplative phase. They're bringing their neocortex. They're reflecting on their emotions. They're reflecting on their bodies. And then they move to the action phase, where they're taking actions to make changes in their lives. They're exercising. They're doing their meditation. They're speaking up at work rather than being a shrinking violet. And then we have the maintenance phase, where we come in for those little tune-ups. One of the interesting things in our culture is we assume when someone comes to our health professional office that they have a secure attachment style, and that they're ready for the action phase, which is just a nice fantasy. And at least 50% of the people just aren't there. So, the other thing I want to say is, if I'm in that secure base, even when those people come in, and we have a sustained relationship over time, they're well, they're sick, they like me, they don't like me, if I am steady and stay the course, they begin to internalize more and more a secure attachment style. But how do we do that? So Yaya is going to lead us through a heart meditation, the second time today, which is so central, again, to Sufi practice and to our lives as human beings. And this is in the handouts. It's called, has a different name, it's called a neuromystical meditation or something like that. But it's all written up for you to do at home.
So before you begin, what I'd like you to do is turn and face a partner. So just hopefully you'll have either somebody right behind you or somebody right next to you, and just remember that that's your partner. You don't have to do another thing with them. Actually, then you turn back in your chair. So it's just something to remember of how to go to, right?
Just remember it. There'll be a moment for it in a little while.
So see if you can just now quiet down. You're not facing your partner. You don't have to. And if you're feeling comfortable enough, letting your eyes close. We're going to come back into that state that Tammy and Barb brought us through. We don't have the heart music, but maybe it will be created in the background of our heart anyway. So just feeling your feet on the ground. So as you're starting to breathe, why don't you put your hand on your belly so that you can feel that ground, that way in which you feel supported in your life, that you feel supported right now in your own body. And imagine your feet growing roots down past this carpeting and the flooring underneath into the beautiful soil underneath, down into the very bowels of the earth, so that you have this wonderful rooting. And this rooting comes up and allows you to feel your connection with your legs on the chair, helps you to feel your back on the chair as you're breathing in your belly. And just letting yourself take a nice big breath right now with an exhale that you can even make a sound of ah. So that you're just letting your body be taken care of. There's nothing to do because you're being supported in this chair by Mother Earth right now. This sense of being centered and embodied lets you relax to access your heart. So as you let this happen, gently also now put another hand on your heart and begin to feel the rhythm of your heart, the pulse. If you can't feel it through your hand, you can actually put your hand on your pulse. And I'd like you to just begin to bring your breathing, your inhale, to 4 counts of your heartbeat, just like the Native Americans have their drum be the heartbeat. It's the same piece. You're bringing your whole body into the rhythm of your heart. Breathing in for 4 counts, 4 beats. Breathing out for 4 beats. And again, as you're doing this, you can let yourself breathe fully in your heart and letting that heart area expand to the right and left of your heart, to the middle. And feel not just that heart, but the whole area. It may feel open or closed, but it doesn't matter because you're feeling into what could be called the infinite heart, that place that is love. And so with a little smile on your face, give yourself some love. Love your heart. Love this amazing beating part of you that expands out as a field. So with that little smile on your face, begin to bring in any kind of body awareness you have. It might be something that you don't feel good in your body. Maybe it's tension or a pain. Bring that into your heart and love it. Maybe it's feeling calm. Maybe it's feeling really at ease in your body. Bring that in. Whatever's there, bring it in and love it into your heart. And do the same for your emotions, for your feelings, whatever's up right now. Joy, sadness, neutrality. Bring it into your heart, feeling closed, feeling open, doubting. All those things. Bring them right into your heart and love them. No need to change them. And then bring in all of your thoughts as well. All the flitting mind things. You don't have to follow them. All you have to do is let yourself smile. Love them. So in this beautiful awareness of our heart meditation, we're going to just continue to grow this love so that it expands a little bit. You can imagine that it's like the breeze or the air to the right of you, to the left of you, in front and behind. It just starts to expand out. You can feel it expanding all the way to the people in front of you, behind you, on the sides. And it just keeps going until it fills this whole room with this sense of smiling, love, appreciation, acceptance. Everything is all right. And from this place, now I'd like you to turn and open your eyes and face your partner. And take in their eyes. Look at them with your eyes. And see if you can imagine that your eyes are like those eyes of Shams, radiating out this light, this love. And as you're doing that, you're continuing to radiate it out through your heart as well. And just like you did with yourself, you're including that other, all of the things that are going on with them, all of their emotions, all of the tensions in their body, all of the thoughts. And you're just smiling to them as you smiled to yourself. And as you're doing this, I'd like you to just listen to some of the words of Jalaluddin Rumi. I used to have thousands of knots in my heart, tied up like a sorcerer's knot. Through the magic of your beautiful eyes, they've all come undone. So never doubt the power of something so simple as what we have right there within us. Thank you.
In the notes, there's a book, The Spiritual Practices of Rumi, and this is one of the practices he and Shams most likely engaged in, this darshan, this giving and receiving of love. And so we begin to wonder, where does all this relational and attachment styles and the knots in the heart, where are they? The coolest thing that happened to me in 2015 was I found out also about the default mode network. And I like to think of the default mode network as the place where neurochemistry, neuroarchitecture, and the wave nature of our brains all come together. And there are at least 11 centers in the default mode network. One really structures the stories about self and other, and one really structures time, because we can see mystical experiences when the boundary between self and other goes away or time disappears, that something's happening. The default mode network is being suppressed. So the default mode network is now where all these stories of all those implicit memories, all those relational attachment styles, our character structure, it's all sort of laid down in what I think of as these resonant patterns in the default mode network in our brains. And so then, what are we to do? In meditation and in some of the new research on entheogens, especially the psilocybin research, what it does is it depresses the default mode network. And as that core background sense of self goes down, the brain can engage in self-talk and open to new experiences and new phenomena. And the default mode network, the attachment style, is formed in relationship, and this is the importance for depth psychotherapy. It reforms in relationship too. So not only in the mystical work, we're letting it dissolve, but as the transpersonal psychologists say, you have to have a healthy ego to let go of the ego. So we're building and we're reworking and we're creating these secure attachment styles, but then at times the default mode network often softens and dissolves. And in the poem, that's that process of grief. One of my mentors said that we can consider really psychotherapy where it's all about delayed grief. We're trying to open that up, because when we're letting go of the past, the way Rumi had to let go of his hometown, we're letting go of those patterns in the default mode network, and we're waiting for the new to arise. So I want you to listen to this poem by Rumi as you think about the default mode network dissolving, and then something more flowing through.
When the fire in his eyes melts into grace, poison becomes honey. The wolf becomes the shepherd. Mountains turn to mush. The salty, bitter sea becomes the fountain of life. Holy light shines through his hidden face to all people everywhere. And his soft, dreamy eyes keep looking at us.
So there we can see that dissolution and that reorganization, and in the dream of the confused man, Kidder, the guide of all souls, appears, which in Jungian terms would be that archetypal force of the self, this place of deep organization that naturally arises when we touch the depths of our psyches. So we want to look a little more at the default mode network and transpersonal experiences, because we find this in non-dual states of awareness. That's when the default mode network depresses, and it can lead to profound states of emptiness and profound states of silence. As Rumi says,
essence is emptiness. Everything else, accidental. Emptiness brings peace to loving. Everything else, disease. In this world of trickery, I can make America great again. Emptiness is what our soul really wants.
so silence and emptiness are also incredibly important in the relationship with ourselves, because it's been shown in meditation, when we enter into deep silence, our brain actually regenerates and begins to grow in healthy, productive ways. And in the therapeutic relation, oftentimes we want to be like Rumi and Shams, we want to throw away the books. There are times when silence opens up in the session, and the person is in deep self-reflection, or something new, a new story is emerging. Out of the darkness comes the light. Out of the stillness comes the dance. So we want to honor silence. We can tune into those deeper physiologic rhythms, the relationship, enhanced empathy, confidence. All those open up if we throw away the books at times, because there's a time to talk in therapy, but there are times when we need to become more familiar with silence. In that secure attachment style, at times that mother would just hold the infant in silence. So at times we hold those very small parts of our patients in silence and love them. And silence also opens us to the relationship with the cosmos, that larger field, whatever we want to call it, however we want to approach it. The astronaut Edward Mitchell is returning from a moon landing. He's in outer space, and he has what he describes as a mystical enlightenment experience. He says, I felt as if my inner heart was opening, and I felt an interconnection and unity with the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, all of reality. And I experienced myself and them as merely a seething coherence of energy. So I hypothesize that we have our sense of self in this resonant waveform in the default mode network. And when that drops away, we can open to these larger wave fields of synchronicity, of gnosis, of knowing far beyond the limited ego, far beyond our limited self. And in quantum mechanics, the founders of it says, we have this model that the universe is made of matter. And they say that if you're not profoundly disturbed by quantum mechanics, you don't really understand quantum mechanics. But some of the leading theorists now, if you assume that the universe is made of consciousness, and these waves of conscious intelligence, all the paradoxes in quantum mechanics are resolved. So in mystical experiences, I hypothesize that normal sense of self dissolves, and when we're not fixated on that mind mesh, when we're not lost in that roof brain chatter, we can open to larger waveforms and fields, and synchronous events occur in ourselves and in our practices. Edward Mitchell went on to found the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And as Rumi says, when he contemplates this, the spinning of galaxies is a wave of love. The Sufis consider that ishq, love, to be the fundamental force that binds the universe together. And to me, that's speaking of this property of quantum entanglement, that everything is in a state of unilocal consciousness, and we create the separations and the divisions. So I want to come back to our practices and what this means. It means that the default mode network, these attachment styles, can reorganize, that they can reform. So the impact of an enriched environment has demonstrated the brain-building capacity of positive experiences throughout the lifespan. Attachment styles, character structure, the brain itself is plastic and can grow in positive and negative ways. So it's up to us to provide the ground for those positive ways for ourselves and our clients. And then I want you to think about a secure attachment style in love. And this is from the Journal of Family Practice. I want you to think about attachment style in love as we read this. A sustained partnership with patients characterized by an interest in the whole person, knowing the patient over time, caring, sensitivity, and empathy, being viewed as reliable and trustworthy, although as we saw it might not start that way, but it may happen over time, adapting medical goals to the needs of the patient, and encouraging full participation by the patient. That's what leads to healing. So the most important thing that we will ever prescribe is ourselves and our times. And that's been pushed out of modern medicine, and it's time to push back. Because that's the emperor's new clothes that we talked about. The relationship, providing that secure container, is the foundation for anything else that will happen. In Sufism, we call it, as Rumi would say, getting to the root of the root of the root. There's interesting studies. If someone comes in with depression and a disorganized or an anxious, ambivalent, or avoidant attachment style, and you treat the depression, the detachment style will not be affected. If you treat the attachment style, the depression and anxiety will often also resolve. So if we think about Rumi, I think of this slide. If we drop into our hearts and we create that secure base for ourselves and others, imagine what 7 billion humans could accomplish. I think about the harp songs that are going all over the planet at 5 in the afternoon. If we are loved and respected, imagine. So for those of us, to close, whose attachment styles are a bit disturbed by the current election cycle and the characters that we have, Rumi would like to offer a third option. Rumi. Make America great again. And so we'd like to close with a poem by Jalaluddin Rumi to help us all at this difficult time so that we can drop back into a secure base. Sometimes I don't watch the news when I'm working with patients because it would upset me so much.
Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is so full, there's nothing to say. Ideas, language, even the phrase, each other, doesn't make any sense.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.